Hello, welcome back to my channel. Thank you so much for joining me again. If you're new here, hi, my name is Cece and we are talking about the book Interfaces by Anilak. I hope I didn't butcher that name. Eric from Break Even Books has been organizing a book tour for this wonderful sci-fi book and I am so excited to talk to you about this. I ended up giving it 3 out of 5 stars, but hear me out. I do think that there is a very specific target audience for this book who will love it so much, who will rave about it, who will give it 5 out of 5 stars. And there will be a few people who will not like it at all. So what is Interfaces by Anilak about? We are in a future setting where the social economy, where the social how society works have been changed quite a lot. It feels like the two extremes of the individual and the community have been taken to a far extreme and then put together. It's weird, I know, but honestly, trust me, this is how it works. The other thing is that technology has advanced a lot and we are all connected. We have like interfaces, we have a connector that connects us with technology. And I don't want to go too far into the details because they are described very, very in detail. Now, the premise of the book is that we're following a professor who is trying to prove, I think you can say that he's trying to prove that a machine-made virus can be transferred to a human through these links. So that's the basic idea, which is wonderful. I was so intrigued by this, but then the first chapter pretty much was just a monologue. It was just a lecture by a professor, which kind of replaced a lot of the world building. Now, I do like that a lot of the writing style seems very scientific. I have no way of knowing how real and how true and how authentic. Well, it seemed authentic, but I don't know if the science holds up because I'm not a scientist. I did appreciate, though, that a professor would come across as a scientific guy who speaks scientifically, who thinks scientifically, and whose arguments are scientifically, if that makes sense. I did find it a little bit bothering. It did bother me that the whole first chapter simply was a full lecture because I didn't come here for a lecture. I didn't come here to read a nonfiction book and read a lot like that, but I came here for a work of fiction, and it just took it a little bit too far for me. But I know that there's going to be a lot of science fiction lovers out there who appreciate that fact so much because sometimes the science in science fiction is a little bit weak. It did not feel weak here at all. It just went a little bit overboard for me in the way that it was told. The whole writing style continues to be very scientific, and by that I mean the language. Let me give you a very, very short example. This is from the second chapter where he's not giving a lecture, but how the author describes what is happening. He was cognizant of himself and knew he would keep coming back to the thoughts of looking for a way to Dr. Itova's patient, digging neurasthenically into the apocryphal spaces of the infosphere for such cases and trying to break the synaptic defenses in various spaces where he assumed that answers could be found. I feel like this is a wonderful writing style, but as a not native English speaker, it took me a little bit longer to get through, similarly to a nonfiction book, because all of the words, all of the explanations of how this world functions, all of the explanations of how the technology functions took a lot to take in and took a lot to understand because it was written in such a scientific way. So even though I do think that there's a lot of people who will rave about it, it was hard for me to follow along and not be taken out of the story all the time because I didn't fully understand what was going on without reading much more slowly than I'm used to with fiction books. It's not a bad thing, but it kind of was bad for the flow for my reading style. Another thing happened where the character names were a little bit mixed up. So we have two people who are doctors, who are professors, and they have been spoken about with doctor and then their last name, and then all of a sudden we're changing to first names, and I was confused at first to understand who we're talking about, but that was just a minor thing. Overall, I really did appreciate this type of writing style, even though I read it a lot slower than I'm used to. But let me give you another example of the writing style for you to get a good feel. Several doses of pure adventurism were inhabited in Gary's personality, which prevented him from saying no to a whole bunch of random circumstances that brought to his door the recklessness and audacity needed to engage in the connection they were planning. I think that the writing style just is a little bit more complex than in a lot of works of fiction that I'm used to. And I kind of love it because it kind of tickles me the right way, in the way that I have to engage my brain a little bit more, but it also can bother me when we are jumping between this a little bit like almost formal sounding, a little bit more like intelligent, a little bit more, intelligent is maybe the wrong word, but a little bit more complex writing style. And then we're jumping to dialogues and little sentences in between that feel a lot shorter and where it feels very, very different. So I did feel like, even though I like this writing style, there was jumping between two types of styles, and that was a little bit taking me out of the whole flow again. A lot of the world building, again, after the first chapter, happens through theorizing, which I felt was very authentic for professors, but it also felt a little bit hard to follow at times, and it felt like we have storyline, they're walking there, they're sitting down, they're getting a coffee, and then very complex writing style of theorizing. There was very little world building that just happened by the way. It was all in direct speech or in blocks of explanation that felt like a scientific paper. So these two, I wish that these two were a little bit more balanced, but overall the story is really fun. I love that the story feels scientifically valid, and I love that the whole writing style really feels like we have professors talking. It just feels very authentic. As I mentioned, it is a 3 out of 5 star for me because it was a little bit too much for me at this time. I wasn't ready for this. I read this very, very slowly. And as a not native reader, it felt like I was reading a nonfiction book, and I put a lot more work into this than into the works of fiction that I usually put in. But I know that this is exactly what some people are going to love and going to applaud and are waiting for. So if that speaks to you, please go and pick it up. I have put down a link where you can get the book. The Goodreads link is down there. And make sure to check out all the other wonderful people who are taking part in this book tour. Thank you so much again to the author and to Break Even Books, who have been setting up this book tour and allowing me to be a part in this. I had a lot of fun reading this, and a 3 out of 5 stars is a really good rating for me. So yeah, I enjoyed it. Thank you so much for allowing me to be part of it, and I hope that all of you who might have found your way to this channel for the first time are sticking around a little bit and check out what else I do. Thanks so much for joining me. I hope to see you again real soon. Bye!
Just loving this moment. Can we stay here forever? I'm loving this moment. Can we stay here together? If I could stop the time, don't you know that I would? 'Cause I'm just loving this moment. Can we stay here forever?